ABC News, World News Saturday. Here's Carol Simpson.
Good evening. In Israel's occupied Gaza Strip, one of the bloodiest days since the Palestinian uprising began just over 3 years ago. The clashes between Arab protesters and Israeli soldiers came as Palestinians prepared for the 26th anniversary of Yasser Arafat's wing of the PLO, a movement known as Al-Fatah. At least 5 Palestinians were killed, the latest from ABC's Dean Reynolds.
It was the worst day of trouble in months, the violence at a level reminiscent of the first weeks of the 3-year-old uprising. The trouble started when 2 Palestinians spray-painting nationalistic slogans were shot dead by soldiers. The Israelis were under orders to quash any sign of Fatah Day, and they did so with a vengeance. Their tactics included trained snipers shooting live ammunition. It could all have been a replay from 3 Decembers ago, but this happened today and is another sign that the uprising is not going away. In one location, stone throwers were taking up positions on the roof of a mosque, and despite the army tear gas, they could see well enough to pelt any military jeep that came too close. One was parked in the middle of a refugee camp and withstood a barrage of rocks, at times from those too young to even reach the target. In addition to those killed, more than 150 Palestinians were wounded, arriving amid chaotic scenes, one after the other, minute by minute at local hospitals. Eyewitnesses said some of the wounded were actually arrested by soldiers while undergoing treatment. In fact, more than 250 Palestinian activists in Gaza and the West Bank were arrested this weekend, all part of a crackdown by a right-wing Israeli government that has long promised to end the uprising, but a government whose get-tough measures have failed so far to do much but heated up. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Tel Aviv.
The hijackers of an Algerian Airlines jet set 31 of their hostages free, leaving at least 57 still aboard. The jet is now at Annaba Airport in eastern Algeria. It was commandeered during a domestic flight from a southern desert city to the capital of Algiers last night. Authorities say the 2 hijackers are Algerians and that they've asked that the plane be refueled. They have not said where they want to go and have made no other demands. After a meeting with President Saddam Hussein today, Iraq's Revolutionary Command Council announced yet again that its forces will not withdraw from Kuwait by the January 15th deadline. The ruling council issued a brief statement saying, quote, "The idea of withdrawal exists only in the minds of those who intend to do evil." One of the people the Iraqi council presumably was talking about, President Bush, told Time magazine he has a gut feeling that Saddam will withdraw from Kuwait, even if it means his own people will topple him from power. In Moscow today, Soviet President Gorbachev announced new measures to protect poor people and to prop up businesses that are struggling because of his economic reform policies. Gorbachev established a special development fund and announced a new 5% sales tax, both to be introduced next year. Gorbachev's actions come as the Soviet Union faces a major budget crisis, a crisis with political as well as economic implications. Here's ABC's Sheila Cast.
The famed Moscow subway is running out of money to pay its workers. There's talk of tripling its cheap 5-kopeck fares, but officials in charge of the subway are not sure they have the authority. There's confusion at other state-run enterprises, too. 2 days from now, the Soviet Union will have no budget. It's a budget stalemate, much like the one that shut down the U.S. government briefly 2 months ago. This one is a clash between the 2 major power centers here, the conservative Union government, headed by President Gorbachev, and the reform-minded republics championed by Boris Yeltsin, leader of the Russian Republic. As in the U.S., defense spending is a big part of the battle. Russia wants to keep more money at home for domestic needs, rather than sending it to the central government with its large military budget. The Russian parliament has declared it will deliver only about 1/5 as many rubles as last year. Gorbachev angrily denounced that as a blueprint for destroying the union. Some Russian officials fear Gorbachev holds the upper hand.
The central government and the president himself hold all the buttons of power, a powerful banking system, the army, and the courts.
Gorbachev has a choice:
between a democratic approach of negotiating with the republics for more money and a more dictatorial way of impounding it. How he handles this crisis may signal where he's leading this country. Sheila Kast, ABC News, Moscow.
In Japan, Prime Minister Kaifu revamped his cabinet today, firing his justice minister, who had caused an international furor by insulting American blacks, comparing them to prostitutes. The former minister will now serve as chairman of the ruling party's Legislative Affairs Committee. In our next segment, the triple whammy of the new tax law that takes effect next